Proving triangle congruence ASA. Is triangle SIM congruent to triangle PLE? Angle side angle postulate. ASA postulate. If the two angles and the included side of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding two angles and the included side of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. Here are some possible illustrations of ASA postulate. This simply means that if angle I is congruent to angle L, segment SI is congruent to segment PL, and angle S is congruent to angle P, then the two triangles are congruent. Triangle SIM is congruent to triangle PLE. Let's prove triangle congruence using two-column proof. Example 1. Given angle I is congruent to angle A, segment IS is congruent to segment AS, prove triangle SIN is congruent to triangle SAD. Sometimes it helps if we are going to separate overlapping triangles. It looks like this. Our first statement is angle I is congruent to angle A. Given. Next is segment IS is congruent to segment AS, and this is also given. The third is angle S is congruent to angle S, and the reason is reflexive property. We already have three corresponding parts congruent, two angles and an included side. So the next statement is triangle SIN is congruent to triangle SAD, and the reason is ASA postulate. Example number 2. Given angle G is congruent to angle S, segment IG is congruent to segment IS, prove triangle GIT is congruent to triangle SIF. Our first statement is angle G is congruent to angle S. The reason is given. The next statement is segment IG is congruent to segment IS. It is also given. In the figure, segment GS and segment TF form vertical angles. This implies that angle GIT is congruent to angle SIF, and the reason is vertical angles theorem. Now that we have two corresponding angles and an included side congruent, our fourth statement is triangle GIT is congruent to triangle SIF, and the reason is ASA postulate. Example 3. Given angle NAH is congruent to angle TAH, segment AH bisects angle NHT, prove triangle NAH is congruent to triangle TAH. If we are going to separate the triangles, it looks like this. Our first statement is angle NAH is congruent to angle TAH, and the reason is given. In the figure, segment AH is a common side or a shared side. Here we can say that segment AH is congruent to segment AH, and the reason is reflexive property. The third statement is segment AH bisects angle MHT, and that is given. The third statement implies that angle AHM is congruent to angle AHT, and the reason is definition of angle bisector. We already have two corresponding angles and an included side congruent, so our next statement is triangle MAH is congruent to triangle TAH. The reason is ASA postulate. That's all for now.